Hi, I am so excited today to have Marcus with me. I'm Sarah Beth Burke, and this is a series I started to talk about what's going on in the workplace. We've heard the term great resignation. People are moving, they're changing values, they're asking, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? What is work about now? But I think that's really a conversation about reinvention. So, this is my Great Reinvention series. And I've invited Marcus here today because he's the author of the Wicked Company. He founded this whole enterprise on what's going on with these wicked ideas. And there's a lot he's going to share on like how we attack that. But I also talk about professional identity and how that's changing in the workforce. And this notion of having multiple identities and integrating them is relevant to how companies need to solve wicked problems. And the topic we're here to really discuss, Marcus, is this winding career path issue. Because I meet so many people that have nonlinear backgrounds. They're like, Sarah Beth, I started here and then I went over there, and none of this makes sense. And it's a zigzag, and I look like a job hopper. And yet, I think there's value there. And it's the value prop that people need to realize. And there's something connected with wicked company. So we're going to make this all make sense today. Marcus, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll jump in?
Thank you, Therabest, and thank you for having me. Yes, yeah, we'll kind of solve everything in just about half an hour. Yeah, it's a scary, weird world out there more than probably ever, and it's always been to some extent, I think. My background originally, give you quick on that one is so I originally started in design. I got very interested in tech, and then the dot-com boom was happening, so that was really practical. So I found myself quite early on in my career between a couple of different chairs, in this case, so design and tech. And over 20 years ago, I thought like, oh, this is going to be really exciting. I
Yeah.
know both things. I can do both things, and everyone's going to appreciate that I can do more than one thing. And eventually, every designer's going to be able to code and all of this stuff because I learned to code. And I find it quite accessible. In 3, 4, 5 years, this will be amazing what we can do with these computers and on the internet and everything. And then it crashed, and I studied an MA after my BA, roundabout when things were crashing, in something related to art as well, and behavioral science and anthropology. So yet again, adding more stuff to it because I was just curious
Yeah.
about these different things, and just kept sort of. It was my own journey. A, being always interested in multiple things. B, not really quite fitting in because
Yeah.
I was always a bit different. I remember when I was younger, showing up at a dancing school where I was learning how to ballroom dance with my skateboard under my arm and with leather jeans and those kind of things. And everyone just looked at me and go like, "Who are you?
Right.
You make
You
no
don't fit.
sense.
Yeah.
How can you do that, be that and that? That's sort of weird." It's like, well, I like both things. So I mean, some of
Mm.
this is true. So my identity was always multiple different things, and I always find it
Yeah.
in turn then strange that someone might too easily just put one label on someone and that's it. I
Yeah.
find that I don't think anyone is really like that. We like to do it because it's more comfortable, and it makes us having to think less and
Yes.
ask less, and because we all have limited time and attention. But at the same time, so I'm now finding myself in management consulting, having worked for lots of different industries and
Hmm.
innovation and all sorts, and I'm not quite interested in helping build teams that recognize these different skills in people, because I think everybody has
Yeah.
some to more extent than others, or some have more interest than others. Others are much better with specializations. But I think there's a growing need, and I think I just read more just recently, I think that 75% of the population are generalists anyway. So
Mm.
actually, there's way more people with hidden talents and
Yeah.
multiple personalities and identities on personalities than we might think.
Yeah.
So we're all more complex than we think. And yeah, and I'm very interested in this area in organizations, and I feel because we're now challenged with much more complex problems rather than linear ones, which means actually we need to activate and recognize those skill sets and bring them better together and
Yeah.
make them more transparent that they're there. And that's what I'm quite passionate about.
Okay, you just gave so much information, which I love. So we're going to unpack this a little bit. But I love how you talked about the disparate parts of starting, in tech and design, and then feeling like,
Mhm.
how do these things fit together? And people not even understanding you, like showing up in the ballroom with the skateboard and being this anomaly,
Mhm.
and having multiple interests is human nature. But then it's, how do we fit in? How do we find that spot where other people hire us because they see the synergy? And what you were talking about with the world becoming more complex, I think we're all seeing that. We've maybe heard the term BHAG, big, hairy, audacious problems.
Mm.
I think that echoes the idea of a wicked problem. It's something that has so much complexity and interdependencies and variability that there really is no known solution. You have to be creative, adaptable, flexible. I'm sure you can share more on that. And so, therefore, what does that mean for the talent, the people we're hiring? And your other point about people have a lot of different things they like to do. The gig workers, the gig economy exploded just a few years ago. I think I heard 55 million people were in that. That was 5 years ago, and it's much higher now. So it is more normal for multiplicity. The level that I come into with my research is the hybridity, where you're not just many things, you actually find the intersection, that integration point where the design and the tech and the coding and some other random thing actually blend and become married in this way that you see things and have an approach that nobody else could have designed or thought of. So let's lead that into your work with wicked companies. Can you explain that a little bit more so we can start with some definition and then open it up again?
Yes. So wicked company comes from the idea of wicked problems, which is a bit of an academic term for problems that are constantly evolving. Anything that has a big people component to it is one.
Mm,
Epidemics, crime, these kind of
yeah.
things, poverty, right?
Homelessness.
Because
Yeah.
yeah. So and the particular characteristic that they have compared to linear problems like mass production, building a big bridge, building a plane out of a
Yeah.
multi-million parts, um, is that the plane will always be a plane, so it will always fly. Bridge will always be a bridge. You can run over it once it's put there as many times as you want. It won't affect anything else. It will always be a solution that works. Whereas you do crime, for example, a good example is that they try to reduce crime rates by putting up CCTV cameras.
Mm.
And in the areas where they put CCTV cameras, that actually reduced the crime numbers.
Yeah.
Uh, but it didn't reduce crime. It just moved the crime from one area where there were
Yeah.
cameras to an area where there weren't CCTV cameras because people are,
Mhm.
not stupid. So they basically went and just committed crime somewhere else.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a good example where things just adopt. It's the same when you have any other complex system, people working with it. Let's look at social media. You have something out there. Before you know it, people develop new behaviors around it, and before
Right.
you know it, you have influencers, and then influencers get sponsors, and then business gets involved, and you have
Yeah.
different legal issues, and suddenly before you know it, there's a different reason why you watch this video and that video, and why this video and that video exists. Same thing. So you start applying new features and solutions to it, and that will shift what the thing actually is.
Right.
The essence of the problem is still the same, but some of the behaviors around it will shift. And if you
Yeah.
don't shift with it, if you don't evolve with it,
Mhm.
you're at a loss, and then you're basically the slave to a very interesting theory, which is Ashby's law, which means that if you don't provide enough flexibility to a complex system, the system will control you rather than the other way around. So if you
Mm.
want to be on top of it, you have to build variants and
Right.
try different things and build experimentation. And that's what wicked teams should do. So that's then the
Mm.
tackling the problems. You do 1,000 different experiments as fast as you can, as simple as you can, and you go with the stuff that sticks and then build on top, on top, on top. Otherwise, the other thing will win and will topple you over. So that's the ambition behind wicked companies,
That
wicked companies and wicked teams, and tackling wicked problems.
Yeah, because it's all part of a system. Like, they all fit together, but they're not playing well together. So let me just back up. I think as companies are faced with these new dilemmas, the way society is changing, globalization, acceleration of technology, and then people themselves have new interests and new wants and desires. We have all of these complex parts trying to fit together in a company, and the company's, trying to create value and revenue and shareholder stock prices and all of that. But they're attacking things the same way they've always done it, and yet the marketplace is changing and the world is changing. And so it's that adaptability and that push and pull of How do we do what we've always done, but do it better, but also stay apprised of market needs? And so that's where these wicked teams really come in, which is about the talent and the people. How are people who are the heartbeat of a company start to face and understand and explore and experiment with these wicked problems? And so I think this is where our work starts to collide. What are you noticing? Let's unpack the teams, the skills, all of those traits. What are you noticing right now is not going right in wicked teams?
Yeah. So if I just look at the last 2, 3 projects I was working on, there is the biggest issue there is if you want to have a team that is flexible and can act and react enough um, towards a particular problem, you need to have two things in place, two main things in place. There's a few other things, but the two main ones are um, the team has to be diverse enough to have multiple different viewpoints on the problem to be able to
Yeah.
gather enough information from reality, not just from hearsay, not from proxy, not like, from reality. Get as close to reality as possible and look at it with 5, 6 different eyes.
Yeah.
The second thing is then based on that insight, based on what you see and based on the map you can draw, based on that, you should be allowed to, on a lot of levels, just to make decisions yourself. It's a
Mm.
governance issue, right? And those are the two key things I've seen failing a lot. So teams are often not allowed to do the research and talk to customers, even so the company claims it's customer centric.
Right.
But it's amazing how many people. I have one project, for example, where I was in a bank. They had not updated their research at all since COVID happened.
Hmm.
They were relying on pre-COVID data, and the world has changed so much, and they were
Yeah.
still building stuff based on pre-COVID data.
Hmm.
Like, can we do the research? Or you have 6 weeks to build something. It's like, hang on a second, we don't even
Yeah.
understand the problem. We don't even know how these people work these days.
Hmm.
Why we're not? This is completely mad. But it was pushed, and then you get to the second level, which is the decision making, was pushed by management. So management dictated what the right decision was. There was no base on insight or anything. So you had
Interesting.
really good people in the team that could have done this, but they were
Mm.
just not allowed to either look at reality enough
Yeah.
and then uh, help that inform the decision to actually build the right thing and build what's actually valuable.
Yeah.
So the danger for the companies is obviously they're not building the right value, and then no customer wants it, and then they're not making money. So it's actually in their interest to do so, yet often governance
Hmm.
and the idea that sitting there and listening to reality and then thinking about what that means
Right.
is not considered doing something, and not doing something is considered not making money. And sort of those are sort of the two things that are often the
Hmm.
problem.
No, that's
And they can show up in different shapes, but that's sort of the key things I see.
it's super insightful and makes so much sense. Like that fuzzy front end where things are ambiguous, there's so many unknown unknowns. Companies don't want to hold in that space long enough. They want to move into action, execution, see results. But the truth is, to get the right results, you need to spend time in that uncertain space of gathering information, studying the problem, getting clear on what's happening. How do we know this is happening? What's the evidence? I want to backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned governance, autonomy, and also like I heard multidisciplinary thinking or multidisciplinary teams. And I think that is a key part, and that connects to this winding road idea of why we're talking today. That in
Mhm,
order to solve wicked problems, you need multiple perspectives. We need diverse teams, diverse backgrounds, viewpoints. But diversity isn't enough. So in
mhm,
my work and research on professional identity, there are people that come in with multiple different backgrounds. They've had many years of career experience and jumped around different jobs. But that doesn't mean they have interdisciplinary thinking. And that is
mhm,
where you see between the lines. You can break the silos down. You can talk and translate from the design team to the ops team to the business team to the sales team to the product team, whatever your unique background is. And those, I'll call them like synthesizer people or integrator people, are hybrid professionals. And if you
mhm.
don't have that, my theory is if you don't have the hybrid professionals on the teams, with the multidisciplinary thinkers and even the experts. You still need experts in there that really
Yeah.
know how to do engineering and coding and whatever. But that's the unique recipe, I think, of a high performing wicked team. I'll throw it to you that way. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that the beauty of this is, And as a very quick answer or expansion to that is, even when you talk about a specialist as a, let's say, developer, and I used to
Mhm.
be a developer as well.
Yeah.
Um, but actually being a developer as much as a designer, or being a developer and knowing about these other pieces that I might have actual skills in, I might be able to do stuff as well. But at least being able to look over the edge makes me such a better developer in the team. A, I can talk to designers better. B, I can actually, whatever I design, I can either think about it as, oh, it's going to be reused for something else, or it's going to be used over there as well, the
Yeah.
components I'm building. Or it's going to be used on a customer side where I'm a customer and I can, emphasize enough as a developer on a customer side. So there's benefit even in those specialist skills when you might have
Absolutely.
to build really high performing logic. If you consider these things, it still works. It's still a value benefit.
Yeah.
In terms of the teams, of course, it's exactly that. So you can talk about DVF teams where people, you have teams where you have a good balance between people are more stronger looking at what the customer wants, people are more smarter in terms of what the business value is and can be created, and people are more on the capability side of what we can do. And then sometimes it's on the process side of how can the team work? Who should we call? How are we doing this? I sometimes found great teams where the diversity is about someone who's really just a people person
Mhm.
and actually can just, oh, you know what? I worked in this company for 2 years. I know so many people. I can pull things in. I can call someone up, and we can get this, and we can get this, and we ask this and ask that. That's another skill, a
Yes.
big soft skill that is amazing. And then you have just different types of intelligence, anything from emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
logical intelligence. Then you can throw in cultural backgrounds, which here in London are plenty. So you get people from
Mhm.
different countries and different ways
Yeah.
they're brought up. So you throw this in. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and I would throw a lot of that into sort of hybridity,
Mhm.
um, and the better of that kind of diverse notion you can get in a team, the better, of course. And the nice thing is, a lot of these things often exist in a single person. So I
Mm.
think, therefore, the value of a single person, having all these
Mhm.
different aspects, being able to bring them out, is, I think, exponentially increasing for companies if they're
Yes.
just realizing that.
Yeah, I think we're in an awareness and kind of waking up moment of how to deal with multiplicity, because the term "I wear a lot of hats" is like the catchphrase. Everybody says something like that, or "I'm a jack of all trades, and I don't know how to explain what I'm a master of something in." And so what I'm noticing more in the workforce is you have people that have an area of expertise, but then they gain another area of expertise in another area. So suddenly they have 3 or 4 deep areas of expertise. And
Mhm,
some old frameworks have talked about the T-shaped person or the comb
mhm,
shape or pie shaped, meaning you have horizontal level of like general knowledge and then some deeper verticals, which make the comb or the pie shape. But the level beyond that isn't just how many verticals, the areas of expertise you have, plus some general knowledge. It's the integration point that you actually know how to apply. Oh, because I've learned about design and because I know about coding and because I have great people skills, I actually know how to interweave and move between them and apply one idea to the other. And that kind of contextual thinking, or I call them like hybrid professionals, they embrace a hybrid identity because they're like, I'm not just one thing. I don't know how to talk about myself. I wear a lot of hats, but I'm the intersection of those hats. That's their hybrid expertise. And so in these teams, I've also noticed people can have functional identities as well as subject matter identities in their profession,
mhm,
which is kind of the soft or hard skill. And everyone has their own unique recipe. And a caveat is not everyone is a hybrid professional. It's like saying the whole workforce, everybody's an expert. We all have different degrees and different ways of either wearing a lot of hats or blending hats. And some are good at one and some are good at the other. So on a wicked team, coming back to that, because you and I have debated a little, and actually I wanted to make this reference. We were both at the Design Ops conference last summer.
mhm. Yeah.
Design ops is a new field. Like that is a moment where we're solving wicked problems because we need to blend 2 departments that have never been together, operations and design, and figure out what does that look like. And they need to talk to each other. And there's a whole conference around what do we do and how is this operating? And both of us are exploring that. So I think all of these are hints and traces at a future workforce of things that are emerging and people don't know how to bring it into common practice. But anyway, going back to the discussion you and I have had recently about skills and how the workforce is so focused on what are your skills and how do we do skills
Mhm,
based competency hiring or credentialing. And for someone who has a winding career path and has gained all these different skills,
Mm.
they don't fit one box. And yet the company wants one box or two boxes. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Marcus? How do we help people with that kind of background and companies that need to deal with wicked problems? Like, we've got a lot of issues here.
Yeah, and I think the skill thing is interesting. So, and I have probably some strong feelings on that.
I know you
So,
do.
apart from the fact that I, for example, yeah, I just did a little article on that on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to Google and find it, but it's nearly ranting. But I was just listening to a podcast on that of some of these new skills marketplaces that organizations want to put in. And for me, they're yet again just a digital version of this old industrial age idea of de-skilling.
Yeah.
So how does a skills marketplace refer to de-skilling? Well, de-skilling was the idea that, you're hired for just one skill, you then put there in this one place, and that's all you
Yeah.
do. Miserable. Those are not the jobs anyone wants to have. This is probably why the big resignation is happening, because people don't want to do these jobs anymore. It's ridiculous. No, it's
Yeah.
literally on a quick other note is that they're saying, in the service industry, people are not going back. It's not because they don't want to work. It's actually and they're happier at home. It's actually they found alternatives that are actually nicer jobs. They can do them from
Mhm.
home,
Yeah. More
and they're paid
flexibility.
better. You
Back
know.
to autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that thing. People actually were forced to have time to look at what a good job looks like and found better ones. So the other thing is that with the skills marketplaces is it goes back to de-skilling, and it's just another reconfirmation of the old silo idea,
Mhm.
which means you're hired for this one skill. How do you know the skill? How does the label even grade? So I've had a very, I think at this point I would say, forget about skills. There's enough conversation about we shouldn't be skills based, we should be outcome based.
Mm.
And when you start talking about outcome based, I would also talk about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? You can be efficient by whatever you do, just get a little level better
Yeah.
in it, or you have your box, polish it, and it's going to be a bit better. But that's not going to make you more effective. That's going to make you 1-2% more efficient.
Mhm.
Effectiveness means, for me at least, you start to look at different solutions, different ways of going about it to be more effective. That means anything is game, right? That means I can learn 3 new skills. I can do whatever I like. I can do a new process. I can bring new people in. And with that, skills don't matter, because if I can have a look enough at a new skill that gets me there, which is what I've done all through my life. A few weeks, a few months, and you just learn new stuff.
Yeah.
Good enough that it actually gets you to the next level. That's it. So I don't even think about learning skills. I just
Mm.
try to get somewhere, and I have to acquire new knowledge, and maybe I talk to people and they help me with it. But through that, do I have a new skill? I don't know.
Yeah.
When am I going to get my badge? Probably never, because I'm not quite good enough to get an official badge, and the official badge is a weird system anyway.
Yeah.
So I find all of this just a bit ridiculous.
It's a
And
gr
often
No, keep
it
going.
often has to do. It builds silos of governance and of like, oh, this is good enough. It's like, what means good enough?
Yeah.
If you manage to get it done, if you manage to get there, nobody cares if you're an Adobe, public access level 3 ninja coder.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And the code in 3 months' time, the thing you need to put together then is different anyway. So you're
Yeah.
learning constantly.
Yeah.
If you're learning constantly, are you getting constantly new labels or not? Or do you need to get labels? I mean, it's for me, it's simply a waste of time to think about the labels and the things and whatnot, which is one of the reasons why I eventually deleted all my LinkedIn labels.
Good for you. I
So yeah, so skills,
It's
I'm sure have some.
fascinating.
It's a weird thing, and I've seen now new software and platforms coming up that trying to do the same thing, and it's like you're just doing the same
Mhm.
thing that LinkedIn did. That for me
Yeah.
personally never worked.
Yeah.
I talk to people, I show them the projects and what I can do, and then I get very excited and very interested. And
Yeah.
then actually I can rarely ever replicate the same thing for any company anyways, because every company is unique. Any project tends to be unique.
Mhm.
You can't just force the same skills and approach and process on it. That's not how problem solving works. It's always different, meaning that I always have to learn, always have
Mm.
to go and say like, just think I know nothing and just start telling me stuff. and then I'll learn, and then I'll help solve it.
I
So skills, don't know.
Yeah,
Listening, that's a
because
good
skills
skill.
are breaking people down into a lot of parts, and we're trying to
Mm,
understand competency. But in this world, things are changing so fast. You're making me think it's more about methodologies. Like, what did you learn in your design background of how to take an idea and draw it or mock it up somehow and prototype it and put it out there? That's a process you gained. And then you shift gears and suddenly you're in a product development team and you've still got the design background, but you're learning a different methodology of how products evolve and are put into market. And if you're a hybrid professional or someone with this interdisciplinary ability, you're taking one methodology and blending it with the new one to find a new methodology that's yours and that's your problem solving ability. And you keep adapting and morphing it. So at that point, it is what you could list a million skills that you have underneath that, but
mm,
there's a bigger idea of how you work and who you are as a result of these experiences and projects and outcomes that you've delivered. And I love what you said a moment ago. You can never replicate and like do the same project or whatever twice. Like, the process you went through, but the situation, circumstances, people, time, resources are always changing.
yeah.
So you have the aptitude and the knowledge, but it's the application is always a new way of doing it almost. So tell me more about the outcomes based. I want to hear just a little bit of a definition of how you're thinking about that.
Yes. So that goes on maybe a little bit back to the methodology I mainly
Mhm,
use, that I use in variations, which is going back to design thinking essentially.
mhm.
But I'm even trying to use that terminology less and less and less. I often now talk about de-risking and problem solving or sense making, because essentially what it is you look at something, then you try to describe what you're looking at as, okay, there's a problem, or we think it's a problem. How would you describe it?
Yeah,
And then you start testing of if that's actually true.
yeah,
Are we looking at a problem or not? And I had quite a couple of projects where I went in and there was very little data on what the assumption was.
yeah.
Where you go in and then you say, if I come back 2 weeks later and I tell you there isn't anything here, you're just having a gut feeling and it's just not
Mhm.
evidence enough. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Can we stop and look at something else, please? Which is not an easy thing to do, but it's sort of that you
yeah.
basically, if I would wrap up the whole methodology into two sentences, is about treat everything as an assumption
Mhm.
and test every assumption on evidence and act and
Nice.
design based on that. It's as simple as that. And
Yeah,
it's Stanford's design thinking. Service design has adopted a lot of that. There's a couple of different phases. You can Google it and you can find
yeah.
4 or 5 phases on this. Very straightforward: problem statements, hypothesis, research,
Yeah.
design, iteration, test with reality. Because reality will tell you if it actually works or not. That's as simple as I can break it down.
Can I
In
add
what
on to that?
Yeah.
Marcus, I don't know if you saw, I feel like this was 10 years ago when Google was much younger of a company. And it was really a big deal to apply and get hired. And people would talk about this kind of strange hiring process they had.
Mhm.
And they would throw these puzzles, these sort of like
Yeah.
crazy trivia things. Like, imagine you're 1 inch tall and you get thrown into a blender and it's going to get plugged in 30 seconds. How do you escape? And that wasn't the exact prompt, but they would be weird situations. And that was the hiring test, and they wanted to see your logic, your way of thinking, your analysis, like, how
Yeah.
would you work through that problem? And it's not like you take pen and paper and suddenly, put these, skills down. You're using all kinds of other resources of what's your philosophy around that, your approach, the way you attack it. Do you use a design thinking methodology? How do you even define what the problem is or study
Yeah.
it? That to me is a different way of thinking about how well people are prepared for a role. And someone who comes from a hybrid background or has a winding career path, I'm just referencing that because that's our thrust today.
Yeah.
They're going to come in with multiple lenses to say, well, in, job X, I came up across something that was similar to this. And in job Y, I had a problem like this. And that's giving me, information and inspiration on how I would approach this new thing in front of me. And someone with a more linear path who's maybe just getting promoted or moving forward isn't necessarily gaining that diversity of experience and exploration of other ways of being in work. So for me, like, that comes back to the wicked companies and, even the outcomes based of like, how do you do what you do, which is not just a skill, it's a whole new, it's an emergent property that's really hard to talk about. Any
Yeah, and
final thoughts on that?
I think there's something really interesting going on. So in terms of Google process, I don't really know because I don't know what actually then the evaluation,
Yeah,
what they're really looking for.
yeah,
And sometimes it feels a bit gimmicky and quirky, but
and
it
it's
could be
changed.
fun, it could be not, yeah. And there's a lot of building a brand behind them
I
in the process.
know.
It's like,
It
oh,
made a
this
great
trend.
headline.
And in the end, they're so big now,
Yeah,
they're probably not that madly different from other big organizations. But the other thing with the having worked, working in a very, let's call it linear, some career
mhm,
or a classic career, I'm doubting that will be a thing people are looking for. There's a couple of indicators for
yeah,
that tells you that that's not going to survive
yeah,
too madly longer. One is I think we're recognizing that if you've been sitting in a company for 10, 20 years, the company is trying to get rid of you actually. So, and I
mhm,
know this from C-level conversations where,
mhm,
because if you would then have done this and you don't want to learn,
mhm,
then you become a problem
yeah,
because they need you for new stuff. And if you're not flexible,
yeah,
you're not going to be welcome. I'm not going to tell you straight to the face, but that's basically how that often works. The other thing is, um, it's interesting that back in the crafts a long time ago, carpenters, for example, would travel around different
mhm,
sites and learn different things and how to do stuff. And it was a benefit. It was they call them the Wanderjahr, where you just for a year or two or three would walk around and travel
yeah,
and just get to know other stuff
yeah,
and see how other people work. And it's really beneficial. And I think that's the kind of stuff
yeah,
I hope I'll see companies do more. And universities are a good indicator for that. Universities already started to put in their application descriptions,
yeah,
some of them to say, look, we actually appreciate not that you're not just good at some stuff,
yeah,
but you have these tangential other interests that
mhm,
might or might not be complementary. They really look at people who, have these multitude of
yeah.
ways of looking at things rather than just shooting for one thing. And
Marcus, I'm gonna show a comment we have,
yes,
from
please.
someone who's watching. This is Jasna, and
Mhm,
she says, "I guess these skills are great for HR folks to box people in." This was from a moment ago when we were talking about
mhm,
skills. She was never hired by HR, but always, by
mhm.
my future boss. HR did not recognize her potential. So I think people really are resonating, echoing what you and I are saying of like this skills conundrum is crazy. Every year they come up with a new list of the top skills for 2022. And,
Yeah.
it's always like creativity, problem solving, critical thinking. Like it's kind of the same things again and again. And so where are we going with that? I think is the bow. I'll wrap on that idea. Let's wind down because I know we're pretty much at the end of our conversation. Do you have any final advice or tips for people on how to take a winding career path and apply it to today's workforce?
Hmm. I would say don't be afraid of go where it leads you. I think
Mm,
is the biggest thing. So I keep finding people who I find amazingly high skilled, often maybe too much wanting to stick to the industry they're in.
yeah.
Problems are out there everywhere, and I think generally, I haven't found a problem I didn't like. I haven't found a project I didn't really like because they're all challenges and they're all interesting,
Mhm.
and a lot of them, most of them have to some extent good people in there, and it's nice and fun to work there. So you will learn something. So don't restrict yourself with the industry you're working in because I think your skills are definitely needed in most places,
Yeah.
unless it's a very specialist skill, which
Yeah.
I find rare. I think the second thing is exactly that. A little bit goes with the comment.
Mhm.
See how you get your way in. See how build a network.
Mhm.
So HR is rapidly changing. I know quite a couple of thought leaders on that who are trying to build very different new HR processes and ways of thinking about how to hire people
Yeah.
and what to do with people and how to bring the right people in. But that's a slow process. So in the meantime, build your network. So it's always been statistically true as well that you're often getting hired through more the
Yeah.
network than other people. And so just build that because that will give you a bit of more safety net, I would say. And you'll meet more people that are more alike like you, so you get more energy from it. And they will point out, and it will be a helpful thing. It
Yeah.
helped me a lot through my network and more, and just to get jobs the stuff that you don't see anywhere, that's not advertised anywhere. You know what I mean?
Completely.
So
Especially if you're someone that doesn't fit in a box, you kind of need someone to make that warm intro to give you a foot in the door. And just to enforce your point about not being scared. So if you do have this winding career path and you're like, it's holding me back, it's a deficit, you need to find it as a positive. It's actually your value prop when you can make a clear statement of how your different parts of your background fit together and create a bridge to a future job of like, you want to hire me because I bring X and Y and Z together. And the
yeah,
intersection of those is more valuable because I'm a silo breaker. I see between the lines and I'm a connective tissue person. And that's what employers need to look for and hire. But you have to make that value very clear to them. You can't assume they will read it on your resume.
it's a bit weird like that because of just like again one of the recent projects where you see things are there's a service and there's 4 or 5 different parts of that, and they can't find the right problems to fix because everything's so segmented.
Hmm.
It's really tricky to solve a thing because of that.
Hmm.
So if you
Yeah.
find someone who can actually bring these things together,
Yeah.
that's worth gold. And just don't let people the people who like you tell the people who likely will tell you that, oh, you need to know this one thing or have to done it for 7 years, whatever. They're outdated, so don't listen
I
to them.
know.
Yeah, because nothing. I mean, I still see even people because of that. People are forced on their CV to essentially lie and say, you know, I've done service design for 20 years. Yeah, 20 years ago, no one called it service design. So you've not done service design for 20 years because it didn't exist, right?
I
Let's be
know.
honest here. I've seen this, and I look at this stuff and I go,
Yeah.
and it's all because of the pressure of
Yeah.
outdated workplaces who pressure for this
Yeah.
consistency. Like, oh yeah, we want someone who's done this all their lives. Like no one's ever done anything all their life anymore. It just
A
doesn't
a
happen
lot of it
easily.
is semantics and keeping up with changing language and emerging language, but also not being afraid to kind of name yourself. And this is a whole separate conversation, but I teach people how to create their own hybrid professional identity and
Mm.
hybrid job title because if you can name yourself, then you can sort of share what you do in your own way. And there's a lot of things people need to change about hiring, about professional identity, and about the new workforce. So I think we gave an amazing taste of both of our research. I would love to recommend that people follow up and find Marcus through his website, thewickedcompany.com. Marcus, do you want to say anything else about things people can find or share?
Yeah, well, there's my podcast that follow a book. So we read a business book a week and we talk to the author. So there's
Nice.
lots of different areas there, HR and other bits and pieces that we talk to very interesting people. That's a good one.
Yeah,
And sometimes fun, sometimes I think all the time fun to listen to. I have to be more positive here. And otherwise, yeah, just find me on LinkedIn or my website and just say hi, because I'm always happy
perfect.
to talk and get to know new people and opportunities and interesting thoughts. So
Yeah, you're
say
definitely
hi.
a thought leader. You're someone who is carving a path and being a pioneer of what's to come and the dilemmas we're facing. And we need more thinkers like you because we need people that are rustling and disrupting and helping us see new ways of thinking about work. So I really appreciate how you shared your own stories today and your perspective because it always influences me and helps me consider, oh, yeah, why aren't we talking about wicked problems in companies and talent? So, Marcus, thank you so much. And for everybody watching, you can find me at morethanmytitle.com. It's all about finding your hybrid professional identity. What is your professional identity? And how do you brand yourself for this new world of work? So, with that, we will sign off. Thank you, Marcus, so much. I hope to see you again.
Thanks, that's very kind, and back at you.
Okay.